Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Give me 1 second to turn you up. Make sure I can hear you. Let's try that one more time. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I can hear you loud and clear.
I can hear you loud and clear too, and communication is the key. So let's get right to the business. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Last time I checked, I don't know if I can say this on camera, but I feel good because I'm still black.
Well, how about that? How about that? I think it's okay to say that on camera, and I'll echo that sentiment.
Well, now that we are both on the same page, we have demonstrated unity according to the definition. Hopefully we can have a unified discussion. I welcome this dialogue. I was very adamant about speaking with you specifically. I've done my research on you. So I'm looking forward to you and I talking.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. You do know who I work for and what I do if you've done my research.
That is correct.
If you've done your research, you know that I'm with CBN, Christian Broadcasting Network.
Absolutely.
And so let me just, can I just keep it 100?
I would hope that you didn't bring anything less than a Benjamin, but if you didn't, you know, we can always get a love offering from those folks that are tuned in that might want to make sure you're able to deliver 100. Please keep it 100, sir.
So I'm national security correspondent for our network. And so that covers a broad range of things, both domestic and international. I saw a couple of stories involving the NSAC and thought this would be, a great opportunity to interview you and kind of find out what the group is about, what the aims are, how it came about, sort of, goals, that type of thing. But if I'm honest, and this is an initiative that I took upon myself.
Here we go.
Now, again, you know who I work for.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
At the end of the day, I'm going to have to, I'm hoping that I think it's important for us to be, we can't be tunnel visioned in our coverage on any level. And I think it's important for us to invite and to bring in as many different sides of any equation that we can, which is why I invited you to come on, and I appreciate you accepting my invitation. I don't honestly know how it's going to play out when it comes to those who make the final decisions. But I thought that if I had an opportunity to interview you, I could present it in such a way that they would be palatable to it. Now, I don't know if they're going to want me to, having interviewed you, go and interview somebody else who can kind of balance out the piece, which I wouldn't be opposed to. It's just that, unlike yourself, some others may not be as amenable to coming on and doing an interview with me. So I say all that to say thank you for agreeing to talk to me, and my goal is to properly and accurately represent everyone that has a stake in what's going on from a security standpoint,
Sure.
in our right now.
Sure.
So having said that, I think I've already covered essentially what I'm going to ask you. I haven't started rolling yet. Is there anything that you want to talk about before I actually start recording?
It's not what I want to talk about. It's what I don't want to talk about. I am here to have a constructive dialogue with you. I know exactly what square you stand on, so to speak, and I understand the parameters of where the output from this discussion could be filtered, altered, or so forth. What I will not do is I will not engage in petty discussions. I will not engage, as they say, we can keep it 100. I don't dig around and mess. I'm here more so to talk about the methodology, the framework, the intents, and the reasons that something like the NFAC needs to exist in an environment that is so-called governed by a constitution, a Bill of Rights, and a Declaration of Independence, and why there was a necessity to form such an organism. Additionally, what I will not talk about are things that involve me personally. Who I am is really not important at this point. It's where we are, not where we've been. You being a member of that particular network that stands on Christian values knows that it is your father that said that keep no record of wrongs. That's what he said. I didn't make it up. Go look it up yourself. So I'm not here to talk about the record of wrongs that involve me. I'm here to talk about how we address the record of wrongs that have been done to us as a people and how we do that constructively and what the alternatives are if that can't be achieved. There's nothing else that I want to talk to you about off camera.
Yeah, and everything that you just say, I agree to wholeheartedly, with one caveat. Do you mind talking about the fact that you ran for president and how that went and how that may have played into the formation of the group?
I think that that's integral to this conversation. As a matter of fact, I would expect you to dig into the paradigm that has shifted enough that someone who would avail themselves to the process of seeking the presidency of the United States for all people could then 4 years later metamorphosize into a pro-black militant leading an armed militia that's solely focused on one demographic of this nation. I would expect you to be the individual to raise that question.
Good. Well, everything that you talked about that you or mentioned that you did not want to talk about, fortunately for us, was not on my agenda anyway. That's not what, like you said, that's not what we're here for. So I'm going to go ahead and start rolling then to make sure that I don't, believe it or not, I've done an interview before and forgot to roll on it. And the person was gracious enough to do it again, but I don't want to repeat that mistake. And also let me make sure I might close my email so that doesn't go off in the middle of this. 1 second, I'm saving now. All right, I think we're good to go. If you don't mind, please go ahead and start by saying and spelling your first and last name.
My actual government name, which is, of course, is no secret anymore, is John, John. Middle name is Fitzgerald, Fitzgerald. I was named after John Kennedy, so you can't mess it up. Last name is Johnson, like the president that succeeded him after the assassination, John, Son. However, I am the Supreme Commander, the title I hold, of Grandmaster J, just as it sounds. It is not something that is to be akin to any of the titles that have been associated with any other groups like the Ku Klux Klan. Grandmaster actually carries over from my music days. You remember back in the day, everybody was a grand master or a cut master or a funk master. You were a master of something. Nowadays, you're a little this, a little that. So people know my age. If they know anything about music, they say, I bow down to no man, but you used to boogie on the dance floor. Because if the Grandmaster came out, it was time for us to move back the tables and the chairs. So that's who I am. So you can feel comfortable to call me Mr. Johnson. You can call me Grandmaster J, whatever makes you feel comfortable. But like the old saying, whatever you do, you don't have to call me Johnson. You don't have to call me John. You call me what makes you feel comfortable.
I hear you. I won't call you Johnson. I'll stick with either John or Grandmaster J. How about that?
That's fine. That'll work.
So talk to me. Let's just kick it off by talking to me about why the formation of the NFAC. And let me just say, keeping in mind who we are, I may refer to the group as the NFAC, but I probably will not spell out what the acronyms of the group mean for our particular network, if you can understand that.
I can perfectly understand that, and let me add to that. You know, I worked in radio back in the day when we all were a jack of all trades. And one of the things that I became very, very cognizant of are safe harbor hours, if you know what those are. It's a little known law that most folks don't know about, that after 10 p.m., you can say or do anything that you want on radio or TV. It's called safe harbor hours. However, you must temper that against your audience. If you're in it predominantly, if you're in the Bible Belt, I don't think you're going to last long if you decide to indulge in safe harbor activities. So I understand the audience. I have no problem with the INFACT or the NFAC that makes it palatable to your audience.
So why did you decide to start the group?
Well, I didn't decide to start the group. I think that's a misnomer that most folks have. I didn't sit down one day and say, I'm going to form this organization. This organization grew out of like-minded conversations that were already happening. They're happening in your homes. They're happening in your churches. They're happening in the workplaces. They're happening on the streets. And these conversations, of course, are had by everyone, but when they start to be had by your veterans, when they're had by people who are registered voters, legal gun owners, homeowners, people who've actually bought into the social system fabric, who now begin to see a problem, those conversations begin to metamorphosize into a desire for someone to do something, someone to respond in kind to what we began to perceive was a nonstop occurrence of grievances, human rights violations against people of color in this country. And that the response by this country was not equal to the same events happening with people who were not of color, who received what appeared to be a better shake, so to speak, a better handed justice, a better everything. So what ended up happening was we did a lot of talking. And we're not talking young folks here. We're talking folks in their 40s, 50s, 60s, who have the history and the wisdom of remembering the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, to where we are today. If you've been back then, you can tell when we begin to go backwards. If you've never been there, you couldn't see it. We could see it. We begin to see more and more incidents that reminded us of things that we thought were long gone. We thought that because we had arrived at a certain level in our social development, that those things were things we could talk to our children about as this is how it used to be. I have a very hard time explaining to my child about the bygone era of lynching when there's suspicion that a lynching just happened. When we start seeing the Ahmaud Arbery case where white men hunted down a black man and killed him. This was not a police on civilian violence. This was citizen on citizen violence, reminiscent of Jim Crow. When we start seeing the resurgence of the Confederate flag, which I don't care how you try to talk, it's our heritage. Whose heritage? Because you have to remember, we're supposed to be the United States, not the we're united until we remember our history and you remember yours states. We're supposed to be the United States. So when we saw the resurgence of those symbols, as painful as they were, combine that with the activities of the last 5 years, going all the way back to Trayvon Martin and then coming all the way up to today with George Floyd, we see not things getting better, but getting worse. The formation of the NFAC was inevitable, but it more so grew around my actions. It was not something that I formed. When Ahmaud Arbery was killed, and I and a small group of my friends decided to pay a visit to Brunswick, Georgia, to find out why justice was not moving along as it should, maybe to give it a nudge, so to speak, and also to express to America that there is a demographic within this country that is able to exercise its constitutional rights to bear arms, peaceably assemble and address grievances to the government that was all black, that it was time for America to realize who was sleeping in their bed with them. Thus, the NFAC began to grow. And then after the threat, that it's ironic we're talking today because that same threat is being circulated again on social media. It keeps coming back with a different flavor. But back in July, there was a threat, so-called made by white supremacists and the Ku Klux Klan, our old friends from back in the day, that they were going to start killing black folks at 8 p.m. sharp on July 4th. You remember the Department of Justice put out an advisory. They said they didn't know who said it, but it was out. And now people are walking around, and since we've been victimized for so long by so many people, we tend to react in a victimized manner. We spread the rumor. We get scared and we're, ooh. When the truth of the matter is, there was no evidence and there was no reason for us to be afraid of anything. But just in case, this was not just a threat. There was a response, and that response manifested itself in Stone Mountain, Georgia on July 4th, which was the day the killing was supposed to begin. We were organized. We were armed to the best of our ability, and this was not just ex-military, there were civilians involved. And we went out to meet the threat in the only place where we knew we could find them, where they were born, Stone Mountain, Georgia. Simultaneously, to send a message to the United States, we also formed in Phoenix, Arizona at the same time. Nobody talks about that because there really wasn't any opposition there to make note of the fact that there were black folks organized walking around with guns. Since then, the NFAC has grown into a massive global organization that has now established coalitions with other groups in the United States and outside the United States. So to answer your original question, I didn't form the group. The group was formed out of necessity based on the environment and the pressures being exacted upon the black population by the United States of America and all participating countries that have a black population around the world.
When you talk about giving justice a nudge, what exactly do you mean by that? And what is the necessity to be heavily armed as the group is?
Well, the first thing is I'm going to ask your question backwards. There is no reason to ask us why we're heavily armed. There's no cause to ask us why we've got guns. This country was built on guns. The right to bear arms is intrinsically imbued inside of the Constitution, and every other of the 612 groups that emerged in 2018, which was down from the 576 before that, which were all white militia groups. That question has never been asked. Oh, there have been studies, and the Southern Poverty Law Center has made note and given out labels of hate group here and terrorist group here, neither of which we have ever had labeled on us, and you can check this out on your own. But there was an Intelligence Project report that identified the 576 extreme militia groups and the 612 that emerged after 2018. Nobody asked them that question because they knew that under the Constitution, they could bear arms and no one has to question your right to exercise those rights. So I defer that question. I don't have to answer that question. What do you mean, why the guns? Why not? Everyone else has guns. This country was born out of revolution. We fought over slavery with guns. As a matter of fact, they left the British with guns. As a matter of fact, when the police show up, the first thing they pull out is a gun. So why would you question the citizenry, which is only doing that which you have said we can do within the confines of the law? Notice everything about the NFAC that is new is that we operate within the construct of the law. And anyone who has a problem with that, either you're ignorant to the law or you know the law, but you just can't overcome the flesh that has you prejudiced against black folks and having guns, which was the source of the black codes, which was the source of the slave codes. Those were designed to keep guns out of the hands of those who used to be slaves. Even today, gun control laws are all based on the ability to remove guns out of the hands of blacks and minorities. The second part of your question, with regards to not only having the weapons, but our entire purpose is defensive. It always has been. We never said we were going to attack anyone. We have never come out and said that, a certain race is this. What we've done is responded to actions. We're the response. We're not the offense. We're the defense, and we always have been. I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, well, what does that mean? You're the defense and always have been. You're the response and not the action. What exactly does that mean?
So let me lay it out for you in plain terms without offending your viewers. As we did in Louisville, the purpose of a militia is to reinforce a political point or a grievance with the government. We had a problem with the way that the government, and I mean from local on up, was handling the administration of the judicial system with regards to the Breonna Taylor killing. They weren't listening. It appeared they weren't listening to the protesters. It appeared they weren't listening to the rabble-rousers outside who were burning and just acting in any kind of fashion. They were not responding to that. So, of course, by law, we implemented a much more heavy-handed request, and that is an armed militia that is still making the same request that the protesters were making. We want clarity into what is going on here. We want transparency into what is going on here. They came with chants and signs and rainbows. We have come with a logistical demand for a conversation, for transparency, so that we can all feel better that the system is working. If not, then the system has already broken down and failed us. And just like history has always demonstrated, it is then up to us to do one of two things. As I took an oath to this country, to defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. When you no longer uphold the tenets of the laws that are on the books and choose to differentiate one group against another so that they don't get that justice, then justice is administered at the barrel of a weapon. We initiated those conversations. We got those conversations. We got the transparency. The government was more than willing to sit down and talk to us. They were more than willing to give us the transparency, even though we also had to be clear that we understood that there's a difference between justice and revenge. And a lot of people, they don't want justice because justice is governed by the laws on the books. Revenge has no boundaries, and it's really just about everybody feeling good about what they've done, which may not necessarily bring justice. Our job was to make sure that justice was administered fairly. The law is administered fairly. Should you choose to disregard the law, then you can't disregard one law unless you're disregarding all laws. And if you disregard all laws, then all bets are off the table. That's where militias come in. And the history of this country has demonstrated that when the laws didn't work out to the people's liking, they sent in their own militias. Do your study on Wilmington, North Carolina, when they went in and didn't like the fact that they had a diverse government that was elected by the people. Oh, they did not like that. So the white supremacists formed a militia called the Red Shirts, and they went in. And not only did they burn down the place and overthrow the government and run the people out of town, they killed a few of the people who were elected. They made themselves the government. Now, last time I checked, that's illegal.
So, to continue putting it in plain terms, had the government not sat down with you or whoever the appointee was from NFAC, had conversations not been had and you felt the necessity to move forward, what would that have looked like?
I can't predict that. I don't know. We didn't take that ride. We didn't open that door. I don't sit here and speculate because there are too many moving parts. Human dynamics, political dynamics, the time, the temperature of the people. I cannot predict that. What I can say to you is this, again, a student of history knows that any time there is an organized, armed resistance, that people tend to get results. We got results. And also, just to answer your question kind of in a haphazard way, but in a kind of roundabout fashion, there are other alternatives than just brute violence, as we demonstrated when we came back 5 weeks later and impeded the operations of the Kentucky Derby. And we cost them $165 million and lost an additional $13.5 million in their gambling revenues. It hurt them in their pockets. And when that happened, things happened the very next day. So there are more ways to actively be effective as an organized resistance other than committing brutal acts of violence. We wouldn't do that.
So GMJ, let me make sure that I have it straight. Are you saying that without your intervention, without NFAC's intervention in Louisville, that we would not have seen the progress that we saw there? That you all played an integral part in terms of getting the wheels rolling?
Absolutely, absolutely. Prior to our involvement in Louisville, and this is not something I say, please feel free to call any of the individuals down in Louisville. As a matter of fact, those who worked along with us, we worked very closely with the activist groups on the ground. We worked very closely with everyone involved. And then, of course, the dialogue that we had with the government was interesting because we found out there were factions within the government that were fighting amongst themselves. They were looking for an arbitrator or someone who didn't have a truck in the game to come in and hear their part of the story so we could find out that there's a lot of finger pointing going on, a lot of ball dropping that happened. Well, we're not here to take sides, guys. We're just here to get to the truth. And if the truth means that this is going to get things rolling along and we can let the people know, then maybe you can focus on this case instead of outside trying to deal with these protesters and trying to keep your city in one piece. So yes, and that's something that we're very proud of, that yes, even though the outcome wasn't what we expected, at least we got the ball moving.
What do you say to folks who compare NFAC to the Black Panther Party or the new Black Panther Party?
I would advise them to go and do some history, researching history. I would advise them to get a copy of the complete biography of the Black Panther Party, what they were about. They were a result of the times that they lived in. They were the results of the conditions that they lived under. The new Black Panther Party, again, is a result of the times that they live in. There is no comparison. You see, people tend to try to associate something with something they've seen before. Some folks don't recognize when they're looking at something they've never seen before. They try to say what it looks like or what it might appear like. Okay, well, that doesn't work here. There is no comparison between us or the Black Panther Party or the new Black Panther Party for self-defense, of which we are coalition partners and have a very tight brotherhood with, but we are not them. They're not us. We have adopted some of the 10-step program points that they laid out for the Black community back then because they're still applicable today, but we have our own platform, our own goals, our own structure. So anyone who looks at us, but who doesn't understand what we're about, have not taken the time to read about us, haven't taken the time to watch any of these interviews, haven't taken the time to go beyond anything more than what they see, then they will find themselves falling for the oldest adage of all: never judge a book by its cover.
So finish the sentence for me. The main goal of NFAC is?
Twofold. The protection of the Black community, the policing of the Black community, and then ultimately not ultimately, let me text, there's another piece in there. Also the continued education of the Black community with regard to their constitutional rights to bear arms and being responsible gun owners. And then the last piece is probably the most ambitious of all, is to form the backbone of a military force that would facilitate the exodus from this country of those willing to go somewhere to establish an ethno-nation that's based totally on our culture, gives us the ability to determine our path so that we too can have a seat at the international table like every other race on this planet, and not just have to be integrated into someone else's house with no memory of our culture and no credit for the things we've done on this planet.
Is NFAC militant?
You would have to define militant. That's a loaded question.
As you define it, is NFAC militant?
If you are implying that we employ a military structure, we have a military structure. If you're implying that we are military minded, the majority of us are. But if you're implying that we are a sleeper cell type entity that's waiting to attack the government at a moment's notice, and we're always, as they say it back in the day, ready to stick it to the man, that is not us. We're not cut from that cloth. We realize that this should be a win-win situation, not a go out in a hail of bullets and lose everything in a place where we don't have the logistics, nor do we have the land, nor do we have the wealth, nor do we have the firepower to win a war that, just like Martin Luther King would say, the reason he was anti-violent was not because we should all get along. He was smart enough to figure out there was no way that a violent path would win. So if you're implying that we're militant in that we're waiting for our moment, we've had 5 opportunities where we could have fired the shot heard around the world and plunged us all into a civil war that would cost the lives of innocent men, women, and children and win nothing in the end. And we have not rung that bell yet. So to answer your question from that perspective, no, we're not militant.
And you touched on it, but so understand that I'm asking very pointed questions because these are the questions that our audience are going to be wondering in their mind as they're watching.
And I agree. I'm in total agreement with you. I haven't heard a question yet that I'm like, I can't believe he asked me this. No, so far you're asking the questions that you should, because if I was to stand there and give a speech without you asking me questions, these are the things, these would be my talking points, because I understand who your audience is. But I also understand that there are those who are, quote unquote, still socialized. As Tom Burrell says in his book, Brainwashed, that they have the mental chains on them that no matter what we say to them, the filter that it's going to come through is going to land in a place where no matter what we say, and I don't know if you're a married man, but sometimes no matter what you say, your wife is going to look at you and say, I heard it this way, and that's the way it's going to be, Eric. It's not going to change. So I'm very glad you're asking these questions, because these are the questions that should be asked.
Is NFAC violent?
in fact, has a zero record of arrests. We have a zero record of property destruction. We have a zero record of anyone shooting anyone. We have not been, we have a zero record of violence. And every city that has hosted us has walked away saying they were the most professional, well-mannered, organized organization we've ever seen, in spite of all the guns. We're not robots. We're not perfect. Things happen. But at the end of the day, we have not expressed any violence anywhere. So I don't know, who would say otherwise. We have not committed an act of violence as of yet.
The guns, are they a method of intimidation?
We don't have to intimidate anybody. Do you ask this question to your white militias? You see, they pull out guns to intimidate people. We pull out guns to defend ourselves, just in case. I've said this many times, and I'll say it to your viewers. No one has ever fired a shot at the NFAC. So the NFAC has never had a reason to use those guns. But rest assured, if I can be so candid, if anyone does, and I've said this in our briefings, we don't point our weapons at anyone. We don't threaten anyone. We don't start anything. But just like the police, we will defend ourselves to the death.
The NFAC, is it comprised of all former military folks, or are there civilians who joined, and is there a training up process? Kind of how does that work?
I'll tell you what I can. We're very guarded about that information because we've learned our lessons from the 60s with regards to COINTELPRO, Operation Black Messiah, that fed on information like this to find ways to bring down organizations like this, for which they were successful. The NFAC is not comprised of all military. It started off being ex-military, but this is a struggle that encompasses all of our people, not just those of us who served in the uniform. So we're comprised of ex-military and civilians. And most recently, I opened up admissions to an even younger demographic that was begging to get in. We used to cut it off at 21, 22, because we just felt like we wanted young adults with us. I lowered that to 18 with a caveat. You must pass a maturity screening by some of us old folks to make sure that you are capable of being in an organization where we're using firearms and we may enter into emotionally charged situations. With regards to our trainings and so forth, of those we don't talk about, but there is training. With regards to how we go about vetting you, there are background checks, there are criminal checks. Again, we work within the scope of the law to make sure that no one in the organization has anything that could be used as a doorway for law enforcement to come at the organization and say that you've got thugs and criminals, as the president called us when we flew up to D.C. and he saw thugs on a plane. We didn't have any weapons, but we had gear and we had this and that. You remember the quote. We were on our way to the march in Washington, which was a peaceful event, but we were thugs on a plane at that day. But at the time, we were actually functioning as a section of one of our chapters. With regards to the vetting and then the organizations, we have a top-down structure. There is one state commander in every state, and then there are chapters with chapter commanders. I sit at the top of that pyramid as the supreme commander. That's all I'm willing to divulge right now about the makeup of the NFAC.
Can you talk about the numbers, how large the organization is?
We don't reveal that information.
Okay. So how does all of this play into, if at all, your run for the presidency 4 years ago?
How much time do we have here? Is this going to be a mini-series? Because we'll be here for a while. Eric, you have to remember that I, too, used to be asleep, if I can be so honest. I, too, believed in the American dream. I, too, raised my hand and took the oath. I, too, I believe that when all of the things started back in 2014 with Tamir Rice and Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown, and when all of that started and there was all of the uproar, I thought that we had evolved to a place where, and I said this during my campaign later, that until we deal with our ugly past, we cannot move forward in true equality. And I thought that when this episode started, that, the protests and all the concern and the fact that we had an African American in the White House, that this would be our turning point, that we would finally get a chance to put this fire out and put it to bed once and for all. There's no room for this in our society. I was that guy. We're going to stand on our morals, and I'm going to wave the flag, and we're going to sing Kumbaya as the boat sails off and the credits roll. It's not what happened. I eventually joined the movement itself, and I participated in the big protests, and I waved signs, and I had rainbows, and I did all of that stuff. As a matter of fact, if you go back and look at some of the more significant events in the beginning of this second point of Civil Rights 2.0, you'll see me at the forefront of a lot of those things. That did not work. So, in my intelligent mind, I began to realize that the only way that we're going to put an end to police brutality, the only way that we're going to put an end to some of these racial, systematic racism that's been happening is that somebody has got to change the law. Well, the best way to do it would be to assume the office of the presidency and use executive authority and create the divisions that would investigate police-on civilian shootings, immediately taking them out of the hands of all of these grand juries and these prosecutors that are crooked and all. Let's take it straight to the feds, which would make folks think twice before they decided to kill someone while they're wearing a badge. The other piece was to deal with some of the systemic systems that we've always lived under through Jim Crow, all the way back to Reconstruction, all the way back into the Emancipation Proclamation. Again, ascending to the office of the presidency would fix that. How did I think I could pull this off and help black people unless I became the president of all people? Most folks who've never tried to run for the presidency don't understand that you're going to find out very quickly that you've got to modify a lot of your views towards certain individuals if you want those other individuals to vote you into office. Donald Trump has done a fantastic job of pissing just about everybody off across the spectrum. You see, at first they thought it was just us that he didn't like. Then they thought it was just the Latinos that he didn't like. Then they found out he don't like you either, white people. So everybody now is on the same boat. We're on the same page right now, Eric, and they trying to get him up out of there. You see, that's what I realized, and that's what had to be beat into my head because I wanted to help my people so much that I also began to realize that I've got to say some things, and I've got to adopt some views, and I've got to get on board with some people that I probably wouldn't in any other instance. So the presidency taught me that. When I saw Donald Trump running for the presidency, before anyone knew what he was going to do, I singled him out. I tried to challenge him to a debate on race relations. I tried to raise the flag. This is the guy you should be worried about. You guys are looking at Hillary. You're talking about the glass ceiling. Are you paying attention to this guy? I tried to follow him. I followed him to Raleigh. I followed him to Phoenix, trying to engage him. I even sat behind him once as a presidential candidate, like I'm here. It's like WWE wrestling. I'm in the place with a folding chair. Oh my God. And to this day, a lot of people don't even realize why I was there. They think I was his security guard or some crazy mess like that. No, I saw Donald Trump coming a mile away. And now here we are 4 years later, and I was right about everything I said. So, big money bought the presidency. Big money made sure that America never knew that individuals like myself and other individuals ran for the presidency. I became very versed on the Commission of Presidential Debates and how crooked it is. I learned about the costs of paying for polls. I learned about the uphill battle to try to get your name on ballots, of which 47 of those states I got my name on, but I couldn't get all 50 because the rules and the deadlines were designed to keep people like us from attaining that particular office. That unless you played ball with the Democrats or the Republican machine, you would not be the chosen one. You see, I was the chosen one at first, but when I wouldn't bend to their will and abandon what I really wanted to do, they were like, well, no, we can't let this guy get in the White House because he's really going to change stuff like Kennedy tried to. You see, they thought Kennedy was an act. They thought John Kennedy was an act until they realized this man was dead serious about being fair and equal. And for that, he was assassinated. But that's another story, another conversation for another time. Leaving the experience of being able to tell my children that I ran for the presidency wasn't enough. Because returning back to the world that we lived in. And then I began to see just what type of person this president was and what type of environment he was encouraging. And then watching everyone starting to show their true colors, I began to realize that seeking the presidency again in 2020 would not be effective because we wouldn't make it that far. And now look at where we are right now. We're in a situation where most people want to focus on taxes and jobs. And when the truth of the matter is America is a hot plate with racism that's on the verge of exploding to the point where we've got to board up windows for exercising that which this country is built on, the power of the vote. But we know that there's a certain demographic out there right now that is racially charged. And where did they get that energy from? From the very man that they're trying to keep in office. So that is how I went from a presidential candidate and my experience with the presidency to where we are today.
You talked about the fact that, everybody's pissed off by our current president. I would say that not enough people are. Otherwise, this election wouldn't be as close as it is right now. We wouldn't be about to have a recount in Georgia if everybody was pissed off. I'd say half the people are pissed off, but the other half are applauding.
Eric, if I can be so personal and not call you Mr. Phillips here, but Eric, 51% of the people who are voting right now are voting, you're right, they're voting for this man. But see, America, the other half, should take a step back and say, you're so busy focused on him, you keep forgetting, the same way we did with Obama. You see, black folks can be proud of Barack Obama, but you didn't put him in the White House. There's not enough of you to put him in the White House. He was put in the White House by the other half of the white folks that were sick of what was already there. So what this says to us is, since it's down to a razor wire, where we down to 30,000 votes, wait, 20,000, 10,000, let's count 5 more, one more time. Because we're in that situation, there should be a wake-up call to everyone that half of America is just like him. The other half of America is just like us. So who's really pissed off? I'm going to tell you who's pissed off. When I say he's got everybody pissed off, Eric, what I'm talking about is the fact that the people on his side are pissed off because they can't believe that the rest of us have the audacity to try to take their man out and put an end to their ride. They like being able to go out and call the police when you sitting there trying to eat your lunch. They like the fact that the police was in fear of their life and they shot somebody 52 times and it's going to get dismissed by the grand. They like the fact that the generational wealth and the wealth between how much a black household is worth as opposed to a white is so lopsided now. They like being right there. They like them tax breaks. They like the way the world is right now. So they mad that y'all would try to end the party. Now, on the other hand, the other half, that's us. We're tired of being killed, tired of being lied to, tired of being overlooked, tired of being shortchanged, tired of getting our own diluted version of justice, tired of being treated one way when the other people don't get that. If white boy pick up a gun, his mama put him in the car, took him up the road and let him kill somebody, got a slap on the hand and a GoFundMe account of $2-3 million. But when the brothers legally armed themselves, when the brothers come walking down the street, they ain't hurt nobody. All of a sudden it's get on the floor, spread them out, what's going on and who gave you the gun. Now you can't find guns. Eric, I can't go to the store and get no ammo now. Why? Because gun sales are up 58% amongst black Americans. Now when you go in the store, they on hold, they on back order. Matter of fact, we close soon as you pull up. Why? Because just like you said, America has shown you its true face. And it is just what it said back in the 80s. Remember the report, separate but equal. No, separate but unequal, and it's still that way. So please, when I say there's a demographic out there that's pissed off, everybody pissed off. I just happen to be on the side that's pissed off about being victimized, not pissed off because somebody trying to end my good time party ride. I got you. When I hear that he pissed off everybody, I'm thinking he pissed off everybody, and is therefore reaping it. As we sit here in this climate that we're in right now,
in this point in history. We're right in the middle of a messy election. What do you see as the future of INFAC? How do you see you all moving in the future? Kind of what's the projection? What's next?
I don't believe that the outcome of the election is going to have any bearing on the direction of INFAC or any other group that is focused on the liberation or repatriation of those descendants of slavery in the United States, or the equal treatment of melanated people in the United States that may have immigrated here for a better way of life. I don't see how the results of a ritual that once all of the lights are gone and the hubbub is gone, that we get back to business as usual, which of course is very tragic in this country. I don't believe that that has any impact on where we go. INFAC itself has its own predetermined course, which is more global than just based in the United States. The same way we've got an eye on Nigeria right now. We have an eye on Namibia right now. We have an eye on the People's Republic of the Congo right now. We have an eye on what's going on in Angola right now. We have an eye on Mauritania right now. We are more than just looking at what's happening here in the United States. The United States is a contributing factor, but it is not the ultimate governing factor of the course that we take. INFAC, will continue to grow. INFAC, will continue to mature. INFAC, will continue, and I said this before, we're not just a militia. I'm not sure, and a lot of folks who follow me on some of my other platforms know that I always bring this up, but if you've ever read The Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams, in the very end of that book, he talks about a master plan to unify the black nation in more ways than just military fashion, but also in economic fashion, in cultural fashion, in all types of fashion, building out our own determining infrastructure and a 3 to 5 year roadmap for us collectively as a civilization, that anybody who wants our financial support, anybody that wants our political support would have to agree to advancing those 5 things that we have collectively decided are what we need to survive into the next 20 to 30 years. You know that it's already predicted that by 2050, Africans will be 1/4 of the population of the earth. So it is important for us now to begin to put together some type of a framework. We're involved heavily in all facets of that. The defending ourselves is simply the first step, because you can't build a house if you can't defend the land that it's on first.
I would be remiss. I'm not going to spell it out, but I would be remiss if I did not ask, why the name NFAC?
It reflects an attitude. It reflects the attitude of all of us involved. We're not, because out of respect for your audience, we're not having it. Or we're not having it anymore. We're not having the lies anymore. We're not having the unequal administration of justice anymore. We're not having the fact that we're looked upon negatively if we so much posture ourselves to defend ourselves. We're not having any of the stereotypes that are impressed upon us as a people anymore. We're not existing under the conditions that have been set by another race that do nothing but hamstring us and are detrimental to our very existence. We're not having it anymore.
So my last question is going to be just one of optics. I look at you and I see a man dressed in all black, at least as far as I can see on camera. There are artifacts in the background that appear to be of African or African American nature. There's a picture on the wall of Malcolm X and a man and another picture of someone in a mask, which is appropriate in these COVID-related times. But what do you say to people who look at you, see these optics, and to communicate something that may, in fact, communicate fear before they can even hear the words that are coming out of your mouth? Malcolm X was thought to be pretty radical. He said some things that were, he did not bite his tongue where white folks were concerned. And so, from an optical standpoint, what do you say to folks who are watching this and drawing their own conclusions, not based on what you say, but based on what they see?
I'm so glad you asked me that question. And the reason I'm smiling is to disarm your viewers. I don't want to reinforce the stereotype of the angry black man who's hell-bent on destruction, in the birth of a nation. This is myth. As a matter of fact, the impact of InFact and myself upon my community is reflected in these optics. The picture behind me that you see of Malcolm X was drawn by a child because he says, "This is what you remind me of." The other picture is me that was painted by someone who actually saw us in action, and they were moved enough to say, "I've been waiting all my life for someone like you to come along." Every other optic that's behind me is not African in nature. There's Star Wars back there. There's all kind of little trinkets back there. The bottom line is there's even military stuff back there. There's all kind of good stuff back there. But the only thing that's not back there is this. I cannot justify, nor can I control your emotions. How you tend to feel about what you see, that's personal. I would advise you to seek help. Nothing about us is threatening. So I would have to ask the question, what are you more threatened by? What you see or the perception of what it reminds you of?
Well, fair enough. Is there anything that I did not ask you about that you think is germane, should certainly be included in this conversation? I don't want to miss anything that's going to be, really important. We covered a lot of ground, but I always like to ask to make sure I'm not missing anything.
I think the only thing I think you asked a lot of the obvious, the 500-foot questions, but if I had to crawl around on the ground, I would want to say that I want to reiterate to all of your viewers, and this is because there's a lot of misinformation out there about us. We're not anti-Semitic. We're not a hate group. We're not terrorists. We are the response to the continued, repeated injustices against our people. Malcolm X only seems radical to those who want to keep black people in the status quo that they were during Jim Crow. Him telling folks to defend themselves is common sense. Him pointing out the injustices and the unequal administration of justice doesn't seem like that's pretty radical to me. I'll give you radical, and I'll leave you with this. During my presidential campaign, I was asked what was the most radical piece of my platform. And anyone who still wants to read that platform, I left the website up from 2016 just so you can go read it. My platform at onlywecanfixus.com. You might find out it almost mirrors Bernie Sanders' platform, with the exception of one particular thing. Just as they've done in the People's Republic of Germany, where they have outlawed expressions of racism based on the Jewish Holocaust. One of the most radical pieces of my platform was the outlawing of the expressions of racist terms and symbols that are reminiscent of slavery and the outcome and the eras after the Civil War. Not to impede your First Amendment rights, but to put brakes on it. Just because you can say something doesn't always mean that it's permissible to say it. You can't scream fire in a crowded theater. You shouldn't be able to scream the N-word without there being some ramifications because of what it comes from. That was the most radical piece of my platform. How you see us is based on what you've been taught. We're here to redefine that. And I would hope that all of your viewers would find it in their good Christian hearts to not keep record of wrongs, but to give us an opportunity to walk together into what you all like to call the promised land. Eric, I thank you for this conversation.
I thank you as well, and for being so gracious with your time. The radical left, that's something else that the people bring up. You would not just describe yourself as being part of the radical left. We are neither
left nor right. And this is what they need to understand about us. You cannot put people into a red pill, blue pill situation all the time. I might be red pill today. On some other issues, I might be blue pill. Other times, I may be no pill. We are not left and we are not right. We are what we said we are. And it doesn't change according to political winds. Does not.
You said what you said. And I'll take that. Sir, thank you for your time. Thank you for being gracious with it. I appreciate it. I will be putting this together hopefully soon. I'll be running this past my editors, and we'll hope to run this in long form on the 700 Club. That is my goal. And one of our focus pieces usually will run about a good 4, maybe up to 5 minutes if they think it's good enough, and we certainly have a long enough interview to do that. So I will let you know. Is there a number by which I can reach you?
I will send that information to you by email.
Okay.
I don't communicate that over these open platforms. I can respond to the email, and I'll be happy to provide you with our contact information. If you need any additional follow-ups, or if you all would like to have an extended dialogue with myself or the NFAC, please feel free to do so. We also, see, I'm interviewing you as well as you're interviewing me. So we keep a list of who's good to talk to and who we avoid at all costs. So I'll provide you with contact information. I'm looking forward to a good piece. And this has been a great conversation. Eric, I thank you for your time, and it has been my pleasure.
It's been mine as well. Have a good day.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Once again, we got to keep the 700 Club, y'all. The 700 Club. The 700 Club. Y'all know we got to talk about this. And I'm on the 700 Club like this. Are you reading the cup? You see, black folks, we could have done all of this a long time ago, but we're doing it now. And since we're doing it now, we're going to do it with style. We're going to do it with pizzazz. We're going to do it with confidence. And if anyone wants to sit in this seat and do a better job than me, please do so, but be my guest. But that means you have to walk the path that I've already walked. I will see you all tonight. Or will I be? We're not doing facts over feelings tonight? Okay. Once again, facts over feelings tonight. We're going to start a little early, 8 o'clock on the dot. Be there because we got some other stuff that we got to go and take care of. But like I said before, I always want y'all to see the transparency. So when this actually hits TV, you will know whether or not they chopped up all of the good stuff. I hope to see y'all real soon. Enjoy the rest of your day. And by the way, tickets are on sale and they're going fast for the award show. Listen, before I go, I got to say this. Hold on. Everybody, hold on. I want y'all to hear this. I can't mess this up. Let me put this in here real quick. If I don't do this, y'all gonna be mad. Everybody gonna be mad at me. Y'all can hear me better now. Let me say this before I go. So, the tickets for the award show are selling out fast. But the after party is where you want to be. And I'm coming with the detail. Oh, it's my birthday too. So y'all know we're gonna act up. Once again, somebody said they can't find it. Look on this page. It's already up there. But the after set is where grown folks are going to be. So if you come in, don't forget to bring your grown folk clothes as well as your NFAC, because first we're going to take the trophy and then we're going to go down the street and we're going to celebrate getting the ring. That's right. The most influential black leader for 2020 Global Award, Atlanta, Georgia, November 28th, Thanksgiving weekend. So if you're trying to be in the place with the Black Power folks, I know a lot of heavy hitters I've already talked to going to be there. I'll be there, of course, to get the award. But at the end of that, remember, that's my birthday weekend, y'all. So y'all know, black folks, we will move the furniture back. And y'all been hearing these little mixes on the show. Yes, a lot of people tell you, well, he ain't no DJ. Miss this one. I'll let y'all know the location because we know everybody ain't going to be able to get in. In the meantime and in between time, I had to drop in. That was the interview with CBN. Everybody want to talk to you now because they understand that it's time for us to get down to business. I'll see you all later. Peace and shalom.